Hello everyone and welcome. In today's card tutorial, I'm going to be creating this mini slimline card with this fun springtime scene. I think mini slimline cards are a really fun card design. It's kind of a playful card design because it is a little bit smaller of a landscape. And so you don't have as much pressure to fill in your card project. But with this particular stamp set, I could not just pick one or two bears. So I used as many as I could. I'll also be coloring in my images with my Olo markers today, and if you're interested in any of the supplies that I'm using, I will have them linked down below in the video description. Now, I am really just playing with one stamp set. So this is the Rain or Shine stamp set. It has all of these adorable bears on there, plus a little tree stump for our bears to sit on, and there's also that little set of flowers at the bottom. I picked out all of the bears that I was going to be using, plus those three little frogs and also the tree stump, and I'm going to stamp them on some Express It cardstock. I tend to kind of switch between cardstocks as far as what I'm using with my Olo markers. Today I decided to dig out my Express It cardstock, which is a really smooth cardstock. It is really, really great for using with any type of alcohol marker. So I stamped that in an alcohol marker friendly ink, which in this case happens to be the Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink. I'm going to have the colors that I'm using listed at the top of the screen so you can use that for reference at any time. And I'm starting out with one of the bears. I probably will end up setting some of this to music because I'm going to show you all of my coloring. So if you're interested in just one of the bears, maybe how to do it with the umbrella, I'll include all of that in here and I'll talk you through the first bear or two. Now, this one that's holding the daisy, I am feeling like the shadow area would be on the left-hand side of the bear because the daisy's on the right. And I think I've talked about this before in my videos is I kind of look at the direction that my image is pointing. Now, for this one I'm on right now, that bear is definitely facing the left-hand side. So to me, that the bear is facing the light source. So I'm going to put the shadow area on the right-hand side. So I kind of do that for all of my bears. I really just take a look at what direction they're facing and decide at that point where my light source is going to be. The umbrella I felt like was a little bit tricky because the bear is kind of facing to the left, but he's under the umbrella. And the umbrella is going to cast a shadow. So I did add the shadow area kind of up towards the top of the head of the bear because that umbrella is casting that shadow down. So the top of his head is going to be a little bit darker than the rest of them. Now, I am going to play some music on and I'm going to finish coloring in the rest of the bears using these chosen markers. I'm going to put timestamps down in the video description. So if you want to skip ahead, I will pop in throughout the video when I start changing up the colors of markers that I'm using. So I will place timestamps down in that video description. If you wanted to skip to that or if you enjoy watching the coloring process, you can just continue to watch along with some relaxing music. Now, all of my bears are colored in, so I am going to start coloring in their shirts and umbrellas and jackets and such. And I am using a red color combination for this. So for the Olo markers, I have R0.6, R0.5, and R0.4. I think I also brought in the R0.3 just because I do struggle with reds a little bit. I don't want to oversaturate my paper because, especially with reds, if I oversaturate, I am definitely going to get some bleeding. So I just brought in another marker to help with adding that highlight area. If you are just starting to get into coloring, cardstock is definitely a huge factor when you start getting into any type of coloring. I mean, for watercoloring, you want watercolor paper. for using alcohol markers, you want something that's going to work well with your alcohol markers. And Express It is a really great place to start because it has such a smooth finish. Now, in the past, I have used Nina 80 pound, which is another great cardstock to use. Various companies do have cardstock available, either specifically designed for coloring with alcohol markers, or it does actually really work well. The thing with that is sometimes the ink will sink into the fibers of the cardstock a little bit more, which can lead to bleeding. And what I would suggest is that you find a cardstock that you like. Maybe you like the shade of white because everybody seems to have a different shade of white. And just stick with that. Practice with that particular cardstock because the more you practice on the same cardstock, the better you're going to get and the better you're going to understand your markers. I have been coloring for a long time. I'm not like a true artist at it, but I do enjoy the process and I feel like I have a pretty good grasp of it. So I am comfortable switching my cardstock every now and then. Now, there are times, and I believe I did it somewhere on one of these bears where I did get some bleeding. And they do have a zero marker, which kind of pushes the color back to where it's supposed to. I don't want to say an eraser, but it does kind of push the color back. I didn't use that here because I figured wherever, I can't remember which bear had the bleeding, but I knew wherever it was, I could kind of hide that because I knew I was going to be filling in my scene a lot and the bears were going to be overlapping. So I really didn't panic about the bleeding. I just kind of left it or I went over it. And then I end up, I think, covering it up when I build my scene anyway. Now, a big difference if you have Copics or if you have the Olos, there to me is a little bit of a learning curve. I noticed with Copics, I do have to really, I don't wanna say press hard with my Copics, but I do have to really work it in my opinion. And with the, Olo markers, I do not. I mean, once that ink comes out, it is coming out. It is I think they call it a free flow system. So the ink does kind of come out a little bit differently than in a Copic marker. It's not bad. It's just something you need to kind of be aware of if you are switching from Copics to Olos. If you are just starting with the Olo markers, you won't have any problem. You just need to practice to get familiar with the markers. And what I would suggest is just take an image, stamp that same image multiple times on your cardstock, and just maybe color one a day and just see how that goes and just practice with it because maybe you're doing really well one day and maybe the next day you don't, but that also to me depends on my mood. If I'm kind of just in a grumpy mood, I know my coloring is not going to be the greatest because I kind of need to be in the mood for coloring. Okay, so I jabbered a little bit longer than I thought I was going to. I had finished my coloring. I cut everything out with the coordinating die, and I am stamping a sentiment off of that same stamp set. And I am stamping it in the Versafine ink. So this ink does stay wet a little bit longer. I'm going to use that to my advantage. I'm going to sprinkle on some clear embossing powder and then heat set it with my heat gun. And what this does is just make it shiny. And I think that's sometimes a fun look to add to the projects. I often forget that I can do that with the Versafine ink. So once I let that cool for a second, I did die cut that out as well with the coordinating die. For the background, I have a piece of Hammermill Cardstock cut to 3 by 6 for my mini slimline size. And I'm inking one side of it with marine ink and a blending tool. And then I'm going to wipe up my work surface because I don't want any of that excess blue ink on there. And I'm going to go on the other side with Sprout ink. And I'm not blending the entire cardstock. I'm kind of leaving it so it fades off into white as it gets towards the center. I wanted just a really clean and simple design. Now, the card base I have here is a 6 by 6. I scored it in the center at 3 inches, and then I'm going to fold it and reinforce that fold with my bone folder. I will then take some tape runner, add it to the top, and I can attach my background piece to that. Now, my cardstock wanted to pop open, so what I find helpful is taking a piece of Post-it tape or any type of low-tack tape, rolling it up and sticking it inside of the card. That way it is going to hold your card base together while you start building your scene. I know I did it at some point. I didn't do it quite yet here, but I know I do it at some point. So I had gone ahead and attached my sentiment with my liquid glue. And then now I'm going to start There it is. I just put the Post-it note in there to hold that down. So now I could start building my scene. I did go ahead and attach my bear and my frog to the tree stump, which is just super cute. And then I can start filling that in. So, really, I wanted to make sure that my sentiment got on there first, because sometimes I can get a little carried away with my scene and not leave enough room for the sentiment. So, that needed to go down first. Now, because the frog and the tree stump and that bear there, I did attach directly to the cardstock. So that way I could add thin foam squares to some of the other bears and pop them up for a little dimension. So that is my mini slimline card with these adorable springtime bears. I love that red. I could have probably colored each of them in a rainbow color, just one of each color, but there's something about red on a light blue background that just really stands out. If you're interested, I will have all of the supplies that I used today linked down below in my video description and over on my blog. Now, I hope this coloring tutorial has given you some ideas and some tips in your coloring. Thank you all so much for joining me, and I'll see you soon.